What is up, friends? Welcome back to the Intro to Java web series I'm putting together. In today's lesson, what we're going to be going over is a very light topic. It's very simple. If you know how to add and subtract, it should be no problem whatsoever. And what that is incrementing and decrementing. Incrementing and decrementing is very useful in Java programming. You can use it in many different ways. There's a lot of applications for it, and I'm sure you'll see it a lot more once we progress through this series with some of the other programs that I write. One thing that comes to mind is looping. I use incrementing a lot for looping. Can also use decrementing for looping. But I say let's just jump into it. It's like I said, it's a very light topic, one of the easier topics within this series. So let's do it. I'm going to show you here. I'm going to comment something out, and I'm just going to show. I'm going to say declare our variables. So when it comes to incrementing and decrementing, what we're going to be incrementing and decrementing is an integer value. So the integer value has to be a whole number. And what incrementing and decrementing means is once we increment something, it means we're adding 1 to that value. And if we're decrementing, we're subtracting 1 from that value. That's very, very simple. That's probably the easiest way I can explain it. It's where if we're going to increment a number, we're adding 1 to that number. If we're decrementing, we're subtracting 1 from that number. So we're going to declare an integer variable. We'll call it int number. And we'll set it equal to 0 to start off. So it's going to be equal to 0. And just to prove that it's equal to 0, I'm going to have a print statement here. Actually, a print line statement where we're going to print out the value of our variable number, as you see here. So on this line of code, it should display 0 on our computer. Now what I'm going to do, like I said, is we're going to increment number variable. Now to increment, it's very easy. You just got to get the syntax right. There's 2 ways to increment. There is a pre-increment and a post-increment. I'm going to show you what both of those are. Let's start with the pre-increment. So for a pre-increment, all we're going to have to do is we're going to have 2 plus signs before our variable name. And we'll call it number. So it'll look like that. It's plus plus number. And number is our variable name. So what a pre-increment does is that the computer will read this, and then it will immediately add 1 to our number. It'll say number is now equal to 1 in this case. And just to prove it, I'm going to print out the number again. So up here, we're expecting the number to be 0. But after incrementing the number, we expect the number to be equal to 1. So let's see if that's true. I'm going to save it, compile, and run this program. Shouldn't have any errors, hopefully. Yep, no errors. Run it. And you see here, like we predicted, our first print statement, number is equal to 0. In our second statement, we actually incremented the number, which means our number is now 1. And we printed it down here. So after an increment, you just add 1 to that number. Now, like I said, this is a pre-increment where on this line, on line 11, it will increment number immediately. As soon as it sees this, it's incremented. Boom, done. Now there's also the post increment. Now there's different ways to use this. Like I said, in the future, in our other programs, you'll probably see incrementing and decrementing a lot. And you'll see how you use the pre-increment versus the post-increment. But for now, it's this simple program. We'll keep it light. So for the post-increment, it's a lot like the pre-increment, but the plus signs are going to be after our number. And what our post-increment means is that it does not immediately add 1 to the number on line 11. What it'll do is it'll go to the next line, which is line 12 or line 13, and then it will increment our number. So in this case, we'll still have the number being equal to 1, and this number being equal to 0. But in this case, it's a post-increment, which means it increments after it skips to the next line, after your computer goes to that next line of code. In the pre-increment, it does it immediately on the same line. So I'm going to save and compile it just to show you that it does the same kind of operation. And you'll see here that it's still 0 and 1. So either way we increment, either a post or pre-increment, in this program it doesn't really matter. Either way, it's still just going to add 1 to that number. And like I said, incrementing is going to be very useful when we get into loops. So I'm just going to keep this video light. I'm just going to go over the very basics of incrementing and decrementing, how to set it up, and then in the future I'll show you how to use it correctly in your programs. So that's incrementing. Let's get into decrementing. Let's say decrement. Can't spell. Number, variable. And here what we're going to do, it's the same exact process as incrementing, but this time decrementing means that we're subtracting 1 from our value rather than adding 1 to our value. And to do that, in this case, I'm going to do a pre-decrement, or I'm going to do a minus minus number. So you see right here, it's pretty much the same kind of syntax as our increment, just different symbols. So it's the minus minus for decrement and the plus plus for increment. So just to prove that we subtracted 1 from the number, we will display our number variable again, right here. So what we expect is this first print line statement, number is going to be equal to 0. The next one is going to be equal to 1 because we added 1 with an increment. And then on this one, our number variable should be equal to 0 again because we subtracted 1 from it. So let me save and compile it just to show you. You see here, it's like I said, started off at 0, incremented to 1, and then decremented back down to 0. Now the pre-decrement and post-decrement is the same thing for as our increment statements. So this is a post-decrement where it will skip to the next line. It will go to line 17 or 18 before it actually subtracts 1 from the number. And if that minus minus is before, then it will subtract 1 on that same line, on that line 16. This is useful for doing like calculations. Sometimes you want a minus 1 of that number. I know in math now I see a lot of n minus 1 where we're subtracting 1 from a group. So decrementing would be useful for that. So there's a lot of different applications you can do. Even in our next video, where we're going over the different types of loops, I'll show you how you can actually use the incrementing to your advantage while using for loops. And you can also use incrementing to your advantage for using the other loops, but it's kind of a different process, and honestly, it's a little unnecessary. So in our next video, we'll go over the loops, but this is incrementing and decrementing. Very light, like I said. Incrementing is adding 1 to a whole number, and decrementing is subtracting 1 from a whole number. So like I said, I'm going to keep this light. We'll be using this topic in the future for many different applications. So just play around with it. Maybe you're just doing calculations and you want to add 1. I would say get in your own code. Try to type this out. Play around with the incrementing and decrementing. See what you can do with it. But other than that, I think that's it for this video. Y'all have a great day and happy coding.